So this is Andrew Stein. He's an assistant professor at Landmark College in the Natural Sciences Department. He will be discussing a research project on the human-lion conflict in Botswana. Dr. Stein will discuss the current status of lions and the distribution and any threats they may face, as well as any efforts being done to help save these creatures in the wild. He's attended Connecticut College, where he majored in zoology. While at Connecticut College, he participated in a study abroad trip in Kenya, which helped influence his decision to go into wildlife conservation. He also then attended UMass Amherst, where he earned a Master's of Science, and then he later went back to Amherst to get his Ph.D. studying the ecology and conservation of leopards on Namibian farmlands. So, it's a pretty experienced guy. And he's also demonstrated several skills in the wild. He started over 50 animals himself, making him a pretty good shot. He's also met with several tribal chiefs, as well as published 10 papers. Dr. Stein has not only earned a Fulbright scholarship, but has also helped 4 other students earn a Fulbright scholarship as well in Africa. He is currently a member of the Wildlife Conservation of Hyenas, as well as an international advisor to the Asian Leopard Society, and has organized training courses with the Smithsonian Institutes. He also has worked alongside with African governments to conduct national surveys for leopards, and he has recently been granted the honor of coordinating the assessment of the conservation status of leopards for the World Conservation Union. And if you're confused about that, if you're ever in a zoo and you see the endangered species mark of like 1 to 5, that for leopards will now be on his commands. So, cool. All right, and now with further delay, Andrew Stein.
Okay, thank you, Sam. So tonight I'm going to be talking with you about lions and some of my work in the past on lions, some of the things that I am involved with right now on their conservation, specifically in Botswana. So the title of my talk is King of the Beasts. That does not refer to me, right? That refers to the lions, so hopefully there's no confusion. In the 21st century, Conserving the African Lion in Botswana. So, we're going to take a little trip from New England to Africa, and specifically southern Africa, which is where Botswana is found. So first I want to talk a little bit about lions so that we're all on the same page. I think everybody knows a little bit about lions. They've seen them on TV, they've seen them in the zoo, maybe done a little bit of reading, but I just wanted to go over a few basic facts. Lions are the largest African cat. Males can be 500 pounds or more. Females are about half that weight, about 250 pounds. There are approximately only 32,000 lions left in the wild. So their populations have been going down quite considerably over the last century. And they're really been concentrated in protected areas, national parks, for the most part. Lions are a social cat. They live in prides. This is kind of weird for cats. When you think of most wild cats, tigers, leopards, jaguars, bobcats, mountain lions, they're not social, right? They come together for mating, and then when they have young cubs, the females will raise those cubs. So lions are kind of freakish for wild cats, right? They don't follow the normal paradigm of wild cats. And so you can see them in groups like this. You can see the female, her name was Crystal. She was the oldest cat that we had collared in Botswana on a previous project I worked on. She was about 16, 17 years old, which is older than I thought lions lived in the wild, so that was pretty interesting. She's still kicking around today a few years later, so she's near 20. And you can see different age cubs in this picture, right? The one staring at the photographer, which was me at the time, is a bit smaller than this one in the foreground and so forth. One of the things that's interesting about the social structure of lions is that they suckle each other's young, which is not the same as other social creatures. Hyenas are social, they live in clans, but females will not suckle the young of other hyenas. Wild dogs and wolves have alpha male and female, and they're the only ones that have pups, and those are the only ones that suckle. So lions are social, and they have this kind of interesting way of being social. But they're also still cats. And so because they're still cats, a lot of times that social interaction and that social cohesiveness breaks down very quickly when food is around. And so usually the big males come in and take the food from females, from cubs. They'll even sleep on the kill while the tiny cubs are still hungry and waiting to feed. And he'll growl at them and chase them off. So in spite of the fact that they are social and they have these things that tie them together, they often break apart for long periods of time, sometimes months, before they come back together as one pride. And again, when they do, there can be fights about food. Lions are the top predator in Africa. Right? They're the biggest thing out there. Living in social groups, it allows them to outcompete other large predators. A single lion can chase off 5 or 6 hyenas on a kill, just one lion. So they're the biggest, strongest, toughest thing out there, and they take advantage of it. Oftentimes they're bullies and they bully other things. So where do lions live today? Right? We look at the map, that kind of orangey beige color is their historic range. I want you to look up in Europe. You can see their historic range is all the way in Greece, Turkey, Middle East, all the way to Asia, and you can see that that blue circle. The last remaining population of wild lions in Asia is in the Gir forest in Western India. But also look at Africa, right? And these dark red patches are where lions exist today. And over 80% of their historic range has been reduced. So they're only existing in about 17 to 20% of their historic range today. And it's rapidly decreasing. In some places like Kenya, you can almost see the entire map of Kenya with just a few pockets of where the lions still exist. There are very few large, continuous areas where lions, healthy lion populations can exist. And we're going to be focusing down here. So what are the major threats to lions, right? I just talked about habitat fragmentation and habitat loss. That's one of the biggest. This is a young male lion. I had seen him in Botswana. He's actually on the wrong side of the fence. He's in farmland. So farmers that have livestock are on the other side of the fence, and they don't want the lions near their livestock. Lions will attack and kill livestock, and if you've got a small holding of about 10 cows and you lose 5 in a night to lions, you're pretty upset about it. You lost half your wealth in a night. So conflict with people is one of the biggest things. Aside from the loss of habitat, once people move in and encroach in the habitats of lions, then conflicts occur. This, again, is a young male lion. You can see he's been peppered with some pellets from people in the local village. He was able to survive and he was okay, but a lot of other lions are not so lucky. So a lot of this conflict comes down to livestock predation. And lions are very good at killing many things, including livestock. And in this particular area in southern Africa, people don't tend to their livestock. They keep them in a corral at night. They'll open the gate, let their livestock roam all day unattended. And then in the evening, they'll go out, gather their livestock, and bring them in for the night. Sometimes not all the livestock come back. And so that's when the lions do their work. This is a picture from the study area that I'm working in now. You can see it's very, very wet, and the livestock just sort of wade in there. It's thought that there aren't many crocodiles there, otherwise they would be taking a lot of cows too. Another threat to lions is snaring. We had a situation in our study area in Botswana where this lioness had been walking through the bush. There was a wire snare set mainly to catch antelope for food for people in the local village. She put her head basically through the noose, and as she pushed forward, it tightened around her neck. Then as she pulled the snare off the tree, there was this dangling wire behind her, and the cubs kept jumping on it and biting it and pulling it and tightening the noose more and more. So it became sort of a toy for the cubs, but it wasn't so good for the mother. So we ended up finding her in time and removing the snare before it actually got embedded in her neck. So luckily we were able to monitor her very closely to find out the day that it happened. We were able to replace the collar. The other threat, which is very big in the study area that I'm working in now, is poison. So people will use different pesticides or herbicides that they can find at a local agricultural store. Usually they sell them in large packets, but people have figured out how to subdivide it and sell this poison in little cups. So when lions kill a cow, people will dump this poison on top of it. It'll kill lions, hyenas, jackals, hundreds of vultures at a go. So this is a huge ecological problem. When they're trying to target lions, they kill everything. So we're trying to come up with ways to talk to people about alternative ways of dealing with the situation. Another threat to lions is disease. And in some populations, like the Serengeti in the 80s, canine distemper wiped out nearly half the lions in the park. And this is what a diseased lion looks like, right? Probably harassed by hyenas, which is why she lost her tail. But looking very, very thin. She separated herself from the pride. And it was just a matter of days or a couple weeks after this before she died. So, what can be done, right? All these mounting things, lots of pressure. We're trying to figure out solutions to these issues. People are very upset. Lions are dying. How can we address these things? So this is where I want to focus on Botswana. Botswana is an independent country. It gained its independence in 1966. It actually was a British protectorate. It wasn't officially colonized by the British government. This is a big difference from most other African countries. Most countries were colonized by Europeans. Government was imposed on them, and so there were major ill feelings towards Europeans. In Botswana, they actually asked the British government to come in and protect them from the Germans that were based in Namibia. So when they asked the British government to come in, they saw this desert wasteland. Botswana is primarily the Kalahari Desert, and they saw nothing of value in it. So they set up a few outposts. They didn't really get involved in local governance, and they let people be. So in 1966, when Botswana gained its independence, it was basically that the British government pulled up their stakes and rolled out of town. It wasn't this bloody battle, and there wasn't these horrible ill feelings about these terrible oppressors from Europe. So in that way, it's a very stable place. It's a great place to actually do work, and you can develop very, very easy friendships with local people. So it's very different from a lot of other places, especially Zimbabwe to the east, where there was a lot of bloodshed and problems between Europeans and Native Africans. Botswana is also a little over 220,000 square miles. It's about the size of France, but there's only 2 million people in the entire country. So that's about the population size of Houston, Texas. So you take Houston, Texas, you spread it out across all of France, and that's what you've got in Botswana. Huge areas that are uninhabited by people, right? And it's very arid. There's not much agriculture that's possible. Even raising livestock is very difficult. So there's huge areas where people just don't want to be. And that's why it's remained, for the most part, empty outside of small like urban centers and small villages in different parts of the country. So just for reference, right? Everybody's talking about Ebola and how scary Ebola is, and Ebola is in Africa. When we look at where Ebola is, which is West Africa, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and we draw a straight line to Botswana, that's 3,000 miles. That's the difference between here and in California, right? So if somebody in California had Ebola, we wouldn't be, we'd be interested, but we wouldn't be panicked about it, right? There's more Ebola in New York City right now than all of Southern Africa, right? So it's a pretty safe place to be. So this is where the focus of my work is. And to give you some reference here, the Okavango Delta comes in here, the northwest corner. And the delta is a very, very unique system. When you think of deltas, you think of the Mississippi, you think of the Nile. Places where these huge surging rivers fan out and go into a larger body of water, right? The Gulf or the Mediterranean Sea. You can see where the Okavango Delta goes into. Nothing. It seeps underground. It goes underneath the Kalahari Desert and disappears. Right? This is a very unique type of system. The water surges from the Angola highlands and pulses through Botswana during the dry season. So typically you get 2 real pulses of water in the rivers. During the wet season, which is roughly November to April, when you get some heavy rains, and it's very difficult going, driving off-road, but then also during the dry season when it's really dry on the land and all of a sudden this water is surging down from Angola and the rivers peak again. And this is what it looks like on the ground, right? This is the land of elephants, right? Elephants are under threat in many, many parts of Africa. Northern Botswana, the estimated population is about 150,000 elephants alone in northern Botswana. Elephants are doing extremely well there. So it is the place to see elephants if you ever want to see one. But this habitat presents a lot of challenges when you're trying to do field research. This was one day, this was actually my 3rd day on the project when I was working on my postdoc. And I wasn't driving. My boss is an American guy who's lived out in the bush there for 25 years. His name's Tico McNutt, one of the great conservation names. He was trying to cross this river to do some darting of African wild dogs, which is the species he focuses on. So we found out where the crossing was, where the sandbar was high, where our vehicle could easily cross. We got basically in the middle of the river, and then the vehicle slid nicely right into the stream. And then we had to jump out and figure out what to do. And of course, the car wouldn't start immediately. And I was thinking, is my AAA card going to work out here? Pretty unlikely. So we had to figure out a way how to get out of it. And by the way, there are crocs and hippos in the river that we saw that day, that morning. And even elephants came, and they were kind of curious on the other bank. So that's me on the right. Tico's the tall guy with the water up to his waist. And then Keith Marshall, who's in the back of the room here. So the 3 of us and one other guy, we were able to basically winch the vehicle out using a spare tire and a shovel and the high lift jack. And then we did a couple things, remove water from the fuel tank and carbs and whatever, and replace the fuel pump, and then we were on the road again. Unbelievable. So let's talk about some of the wildlife that you might see in northern Botswana. What does it look like, right? Elephants I already talked about. Land of elephants. Right, hippos are quite prevalent. They're one of the most dangerous animals on the planet. They may look like big mushrooms with little legs, but they can haul. Right? I've been chased in vehicles by hippos, and it's pretty scary. Crocodiles, they get big 10+ foot crocodiles in the rivers. So when you're crossing rivers, sometimes you have to wade about waist deep to see whether it's safe to cross, like how high that water is going to get on your vehicle, to see if your tailpipe's going to go under, and you're always wary of the crocs when you do that. Cape buffalo, right? This is one of the major prey of the lions. They can be in huge herds, 300-400 in a herd. Usually females with young ones, and males are kind of hanging on the periphery. Giraffe, right? Lots of giraffe. They're one of my favorite things to see. No matter how many times I see a giraffe, it's really such an interesting body shape. I just can never get used to seeing giraffe. All right, and zebra. And zebra and giraffe are another of the favorite prey of lions. Warthogs are always fun. Impala. Impala was the primary prey of all the other predators in the area. We had hyenas, leopards, cheetahs, African wild dogs. They're all picking on impala. Right? Impala can't sleep during the day because of the cheetahs and wild dogs. And they certainly can't sleep at night because of the lions and the leopards and the hyenas. So I don't know when they get sleep, but they're probably pretty nervous most of the time. All right. African fish eagle looks a lot like our American bald eagle, makes the same vocalizations. Beautiful bird, picks fish right out of the rivers. So the predators, and I put this here on purpose because everybody talks about how ugly hyenas are, right? This is a wonderful little hyena cub, and they're adorable when they're young, and they're very playful. So, no, they're fine. All right, then leopards, right? Leopards are one of the medium to small size of the large predators in the area, and they really take advantage of trees. And that's how they survive in high densities in the face of lions, hyenas, and wild dogs. And this is really how they do it, right? This was one of the females. Her name was Quimby. You can see her impala kill hanging in the tree just above her, right? And they can carry things 2 to 3 times their weight in their mouth as they climb up a tree, right? I actually didn't include this, but I have a picture of a giraffe that a leopard had hauled into a tree. Yeah, unbelievable. When I saw that, I started laughing. I couldn't believe it. And the leopard at the bottom of the tree, like, yeah, check that out. All right, so then the cheetah, right? The very elegant-looking cat, very lithe, very quick. Can run over 60 miles an hour, short bursts, turn corners really quick, and they're one of the more specialized of the predators in the area. And then there's the African wild dogs. A lot of people confuse them with hyenas or think they look a lot like hyenas, but they're their own separate species. They're in the dog family, so they're not in the hyena family. And their social structure is a lot like wolves, right? Alpha male, alpha female, and then subordinates. They take care of their young. The young feed first. When they're on a kill, pretty much the opposite of lions. And they move in a cohesive group all the time. And we got lots of reptiles. This is a rock python that I was getting out of the road. But we had lots of different snakes there as well. Black mambas, green mambas, boom slings, spitting cobras, puff adders. There's a variety of snakes. Also, some of the other wildlife. Prince Harry likes to hang out in northern Botswana. This is when Prince Harry and William came to visit our camp for a night. They were involved in one of the funding organizations that helped us with our work. So they came to our camp. I'm wearing my Sunday best on the upper right. But they came for the night and had dinner and like went for a game drive with us. So that was pretty interesting. All right. So the program that I'm trying to set up, and I've just started setting up only a couple months ago, is what I've called Pride in Our Prides. And of course, it's a play on words. But basically, we're going to be based in the northern reaches of the Okavango Delta, right where that delta fans out, that northern ridge there. You can see where it's kind of light brown. That's very arid village area. And then you see where it's green, and that's where the rivers fan out from that delta. So it's very wet, and then you cross the road and it's very dry. It's, very different systems. And this is what the villages kind of look like, right? Mud huts, tin roofs. People use reeds a lot to kind of set up walls, keep their kids in. This woman is transporting water. You know, most people carry water and supplies on their head. So, but they don't have running water, no electricity, none of these things. So it's, you know, it's pretty rural, definitely. And the livestock are let out at night. They move from that village, and then they move into the wetland. And you can see these cows are nearly aquatic. I mean, they're moving around in these waterways, munching on the grass there. And again, because there aren't many crocodiles that are big enough to take them, the cattle seem comfortable enough. But when nighttime comes, the lions are patrolling the area, and they'll take cattle in these wetlands. The primary mode of transportation in this area is what are called makoros. So you get a polar, and he pulls you through the marshes, right? So we had local guys that we hired for a few days that kind of kept us mobile, kept us moving through the area so we could see what we were in for. So how we set up this project, the first step is to really talk to people. Find out what the threats are, find out what their attitudes are towards wildlife. Are they happy about wildlife being in the area? Predators? What are the things that really challenge them the most? And what solutions have they developed on their own? Right? The last thing that we want to do is go into a new place, tell them that we know everything, and try to tell them to change their way of life. Right? It's not going to be effective. If somebody came to your dorm room and started rearranging all your stuff and saying, like, this isn't the way it should be, this is how you're supposed to live, like, in your own personal space, you'd probably get upset, right? So we try to learn from them as much as possible. Find out exactly what things they feel need fixing and how they think those things can be fixed. And then we can work with them on trying to develop solutions that they are going to be participants in, right? Coming from the outside, you're at a major disadvantage. And once you start angering people, then they tune you out, and then your project's over. So the next thing that we're going to do, and I just submitted a grant, and I hope to do this in January, is to go out and dart about 5 lions and put satellite tracking collars on them. These satellite tracking collars obviously communicate with satellites. They collect information about the movements of the lions in the collars, and we can actually get that information satellited to us through email, so I can check where the lions are any day at almost any time from my computer in my office in the FAB. And I can map it on Google Earth, and I can see even what habitat that those lions are in. Darting lions is very challenging, right? It's not just a matter of driving up to them and sending a dart their way and everything goes great. Lions are social animals, as I said before. So if you're targeting one animal and that one's asleep, somebody's got to get out of the vehicle to take measurements, take blood, put a collar on it. And you already know that there's a bunch of other lions nearby. So somebody's got to keep an eye on the rest of the lions. And it's a lot like herding cats. You know, everybody jokes about herding cats. I've herded big cats, right? Taking vehicles and chasing lions away from sleeping lions and keeping them away from our staff that are out on the ground trying to take blood or put these collars out is, you know, a pretty big security issue. And the first time I went out and darted lions, this was in Kenya about 11 years ago. The guy who ran the project is Lawrence Frank, who's one of the preeminent lion conservationists in East Africa. And it was, again, my 3rd day on the project, and we're out there, puts a bait out, 15 lions come in, they're feeding on the bait. Lawrence darts one, starts getting dark. This lion, who's feeling a little groggy, moves off from the pride. We follow it. Lawrence gives me the spotlight, and he says, "Tell us when they get too close." And he jumps out of the vehicle with one guy with a spear, one guy with a rifle, and his assistant. And I'm sitting in the car like, what's too close? I have no idea what too close is, right? And here's like this lion conservationist of note, and I'm like, with the spotlight, and of course you see the reflective eye shine of the lions, one this way, one that way, oh, one's behind the car, and they're moving. I know there's at least 14 other lions out there, because we saw them feeding earlier. So eventually, you know, he does his thing, he takes blood, puts the collars on, jumps back in the car. It's like, "Hey, Andrew, did you see any of the lions out there?" I said, yeah, I saw a few. He's like, "How close do they get?" I said, "I don't know, 50 yards. He's like, 50 yards? You know how fast a lion could cover 50 yards? And I started thinking, well, maybe that's too close. Maybe that's too close. So here's kind of up close and personal with the lions and their dental work, right? Lions have big teeth, especially those canines, right? They're used for, you know, biting the muzzle of buffalo or the throat. Sometimes they'll even sever the vertebrae in the back of the neck of their prey, depending on what they're feeding on. then the carnasal teeth, the cheek teeth, are good for scissor-like action where they can slice meat off the bone. Once these collars are out, we do radio tracking. So here we jump on this vehicle. This was the one that was stuck in the river, by the way, years later. And you take a receiver. Each collar has a different frequency. It's like a radio station in your car. You can turn the dial and listen to a different animal. So instead of country and rap and R&B, you're listening to female 1 and male 2 and female 3. And you get the best signal and you track it. Once you find the pride, you have a look, you see who's home, right? Which ones are interacting with who? What are the demographics of the pride? Are all the cubs accounted for, right? These are the things that we look for. And then we communicate to people in the village. Once we have these collars out, we want to be able to communicate with people and let them know if the lions are close to their livestock. That's one of the biggest issues that people have with researchers, is that researchers collect information, they put it in their notebooks, they go home, and they don't tell anybody what they did. And then they publish a nice scientific article that pretty much nobody else reads, and that's the end of the project, right? And people on the ground who are still living with the lions day to day still continue and still struggle, and lions are the no better for the work that you've done. So it's extremely important that when you find the lions and you know they're close to somebody's livestock, you give them a heads up so they can bring their livestock in and protect them that night. When we're with the lions, this is what we're looking for, age, right? And we can age lions by how pink their nose is, right? That's one of the tricks. So this one, this is a young male. You can see it's a bit pink. And then this is an old male. And you can see it's very dark, charcoal black. You know that he's about 7, 8 years old or older. So he's a prime adult male. This guy was probably 3 years old, 3, 4 years old. And you start to see black speckles in the pink. That's how you know how old they are, right? Once they get to charcoal black, then you just say they're prime males, they're doing fine. You start to see other signs like the scarring on the nose, ripping on the ears, things like that. And that gives you another clue. Once you get them down and immobilized, you look at the teeth. And how sharp the teeth are, how white or yellow they are, tells you a lot about their age as well. But a lot of times, just looking at the nose can give you a good start. Then identifying lions. Lions do not have distinguishing markings like a leopard or a tiger or even giraffe, where you can look at spots or stripes. You can see how they're connected in the patterns that they have, and you can actually identify individuals by that. With lions, right, they're tawny cats. They don't have markings, except for the whisker spots underneath the nose. So we look at the whisker spots. We take pictures of the right side and left side. And then we look at the arrangements of those spots, and we can say, all right, that's female 2. That's female 7. These are some of the tricks we use. So we come up with a photo database, not of the whole cat, but of just the face, just the muzzle. Another interesting thing about these satellite collars, and this is very, very new technology, is that we can tell the company to put an imaginary line with GPS coordinates across an area of our study area. And when that animal crosses that line, delineated by the points that we've given them, it will give us an emergency notification. Lion in the neighborhood, right? Sort of like satellite neighborhood watch, right? These lions go from this wetland area where they're pretty safe. There's lots of tour companies that are really happy about the lions being there. They cross that line. We get the information. We can text people because everybody's got cell phones, even if they live in a hut made of cow dung and sticks. We can text them immediately. They can make sure that their livestock are safe, right? Just ways to communicate with people. And again, sharing these results. Going to community meetings, which are called kotlas in this area, right? The chief is there, all the elders, all the community members. What we want to do is tell people about lions, give them names, local names, let them get to know the individual lions, get to know their individual stories. Because once you know more about an individual, then you actually start to care about it. When I worked in Kenya, when I worked in Namibia, and even parts of Botswana, when I would tell ranchers and farmers about individual animals, when I'd see them in the supermarket, they'd ask about them. They said, oh, how are their cubs doing? Where have they been the last few weeks? I haven't seen their tracks on my farm. Oh, they're on your neighbor's farm. He was with a female. You know, we'll see in a couple months how that went, you know, that kind of thing. And people actually get invested. People get invested in these animals. So when one individual goes a little bit rogue and starts killing livestock, and we're able to track that animal, and we know who it is, then those farmers are less likely to kill all lions, right? If you've got 10 lions in an area, 9 of them are behaving according to our standards, and 1 of them isn't, we can find that individual, talk to the farmer, talk to the government, and figure out a way to deal with the situation. Without the farmer saying, it's lions again, I have to set poison. I'm going to kill them all, right? We can say, well, these nine are fine. You've had no problems for 6 months. This one seems to be developing a problem. Let's see if we can figure out a solution by coming up with deterrents and keeping them out of that area. And it seems to work pretty well. I've had farmers that, there's one lioness, he named her Gina. And he watched Gina since she was a tiny cub. And Gina grew up, she had cubs, and she started coming into this guy's farm and killing his camels. He did camelback safaris. And because Gina kept killing his camels, he actually had to put her down. So we found Gina, we put a collar on another female, and we darted her, and he sat next to her and was petting her and sobbing. And he didn't want to actually kill her, but he knew that for his business, and she was training her cubs, something needed to happen. So, but when he did, he had to sit by himself for at least 20 minutes and like regain his composure. I've never seen that with a farmer. Farmers go and they shoot and they high five and that's the end of it, right? Very different when you know that animal. It's very, very different. So this is how people protect their livestock at night, right? They have these corrals, and they don't really work very well, right? They're set up mainly to keep their livestock in at night, you know, bare bones, right? They're not really using this as a predator deterrent. And most of the predators, if they can see livestock inside, then they're going to figure out a way to get in. So it's really line of sight more than anything else, more than thickness or whatever. And so this, even along the sides, it's not bad, although a hyena, I'm sure, could poke its head through there. But it uses this feeble branch as the gate, because it doesn't want to build a huge wall that they have to move in and out. So that's where predators go through. And lions, in particular, are really, really clever in that they don't actually go into the corral to take the livestock. They sit outside and roar. And the roaring vibrates, and it gets the livestock to go crazy. And they start running around inside these corrals, and then they bust out. And then the lion figures out which one it wants to eat that night, and it jumps on that one. So the idea of having like a really strong corral, not only to keep predators out, but to keep the livestock in when the lions are roaring is very important. So this is what we're designing. It was really designed by an organization in Zimbabwe. These are portable panels used from natural occurring branches on trees that are in the area. And you just weave them through poles, and they're portable. You can pick them up, these mats up, and you can put them on a cart with your donkey and move them when you move your livestock, and just stake them down later on when you have your livestock in the place you want them. Lions, hyenas can't push through them, leopards don't jump over them, and the livestock can't push their way out. So it's kind of a natural solution, and they're pretty easy. So we want to introduce these to the area. It's a culture that uses a lot of weaving. They weave a lot of baskets. So weaving comes very naturally to people in this region. And so it's kind of a good way to use their local skills, hire a few extra people, and provide some protection. As well, we'll be hiring local people to track the lions themselves. We'll give them receivers, and they are going to be our lion trackers. And they're going to be communicating with people in their own village. If it comes from me, a guy from America, telling them about their lions, they may listen, but they're going to listen more to their neighbor or their son or their cousin. So hiring local people and getting them involved is critically important. Okay. Another thing that's critical to this right? Even if you know these animals, even if you actually grow quite fond of these individuals, if they're killing your livestock and you're not getting any financial compensation for that loss, it doesn't matter. You have to look after your family. You have to look after your livelihood. In this area, there are many big-time lodges, some of them very, very expensive, $2,500 per night per person, right? Expensive lodges. And these are tented camps in the middle of the Delta, some of the most beautiful areas you can imagine. And so they bring their tourists out in these Land Cruisers and Land Rovers to see lions. Lions is one of the top things on the list of all tourists, right? If you don't see elephants and lions on your safari, you go home disappointed, right? So people spend big money to be there. And a lot of that benefit stays at the lodge. Now in northern Botswana, there are partnerships between communities and the lodges so that when benefit comes through, some of that trickles to the community. And in some cases, it's large sums of money. Once it gets to the community, it doesn't always get evenly distributed among the people that are there. So there are challenges about benefit distribution even within the community, even when benefits are available. So this becomes a social issue and an economic issue, right? This isn't all about the ecology of lions. Most of what I'm talking about is people. So coming up with ways to work with people to develop a benefit sharing program is critical. One of the ways that we're looking to do this is to set up a livestock insurance program whereby people pay in a little bit, but the lodges basically heavily subsidize it. Two of them are already on board. And when lions kill livestock, then we compensate them fully for the loss that they've had. And the lodges can say that they're helping with lion conservation. The community gets benefit, and the people that have had the loss can buy the livestock that they've lost. If losses occur, we will not pay out if they actually kill the lions that made the kill. So that's an important component, right? If we pay them out and they kill the lions anyway, we're not really serving the purpose. So people in the community get what they want, which is to get paid back for their loss. Lodges get that great story to tell to their guests, and lions continue to thrive in an area that's critically important for their survival. So, thanks for your attention, and with that, I will take questions.
On your initial map of the current lion range,
Yes.
you've got, it shows that the habitat's highly fragmented and you've got tiny isolated populations. Are there folks out there studying those little dots saying, oh, the gene pool here is getting kind of crimped and stovepiped, or...
There's quite a few lion projects going on, even in northern Botswana, right here. There's 1, 2, 3, I think we're the 4th in northern Botswana, right? So Central Kalahari here, there's a lion project. Kutsi National Park, there's another lion project. So in Botswana alone, there's like 6 or 7. So only one in Namibia here, couple in South Africa. But yeah, there are interested parties all over.
Looking at the genetics.
Yes, genetics.
Limited populations.
Right, and especially because these protected areas are really small. And protected areas alone are not going to save these cats, right? Because along the borders, like even in Namibia, Etosha National Park, some of the farmers don't like lions. They'll drag a kill to entice the lions out, and then they'll shoot them. So if you're in the park, you're not necessarily safe. Yes?
During the winter, are animals still active, or are they do they hibernate like bears do?
They're still quite active. It doesn't get quite as cold as around here, right? So let's see. Here's the equator, cuts straight through Kenya, so a little bit further north, and then there's the tropics. So it's like similar weather to Florida, maybe. So it doesn't get quite as cold. So the animals are active all year round.
Oh, so it's not, it doesn't feel dead?
No. Very much alive. Yeah. Yes, in the back.
Do you guys use the new technologies that you use to track the lions? Do you use that in any way with the tourist attractions so you can bring in more money to the communities?
It's an interesting question. Some people do that more than others. It really depends on your objectives for the project. Some people are very strict about this is science and we're not trying to do things with tourists and this and that. And other people welcome that partnership. So it really depends. But I see it as an advantage to work with the tour operators as long as they're not disturbing the animals too much by bringing like loads and loads of cars and surrounding animals. I've seen lions where there's 30 cars around them, and that's not ideal. So trying to come up with ways to be respectful of the animals but also meet the objectives of the community, because if they're not benefiting from lions, they will disappear. So using the technology and developing partnerships is pretty critical. Yes?
You talked about a lion going rogue.
Mm-hmm.
So is it typical that what they tend to kill are other animals and other wild animals, and that when they start to attack a domestic animal, that's more unusual?
Right. More often than not, wild animals would rather attack and prey upon wild animals. So, in some of the areas where I've worked, lions will move around cattle herds and kill buffalo or giraffe or zebra instead of going after livestock. There's a negative association with it, high risk. So I think in many cases it's a last resort. And oftentimes you do see either young animals or injured animals doing it, or very old animals, as opposed to young animals in their prime. They go after what they're familiar with instead. Once they get a taste for livestock and how easy it can be, that's a different story.
It would be easier.
Yeah. Yes?
Notice that the ecology of the savanna or this wild habitat is based on all of the species, the elephants, the giraffes, each harvesting their own piece of vegetation, and the predators.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens when a ecosystem loses its lions? What are the carry-on effects of that, since they're obviously an important part of it?
Right. That's an interesting question. I don't think anybody's specifically delved into that. Even in my classes we talk about top-down predator effects, and of course the example of the wolves in Yellowstone, where they've, the reintroduction of wolves after 100 years has completely changed back the vegetation and habitat within that area. So I'd imagine that there's got to be similar effect. Hyenas can take pretty big things, but nothing takes, these big buffalo that lions can take, and keeps those buffalo moving in the habitat. And so removing lions, I would imagine, could have a similar effect, that top-down effect that cascades throughout the ecosystem. But nobody's really, to my knowledge, nobody has really studied that. Yes?
Just out of curiosity, what was, while you were over there, what was the most dangerous situation you were in?
I once had a drugged leopard wake up between my legs. Very inopportune moment. Of course it's my fault, but yeah, it was, when the animals are asleep, they can't regulate their own body temperature, so you have to keep track of that. So, you have this, rectal thermometer, and you're checking every 15 minutes or so to make sure that their temperature is within a healthy range. In this particular animal, it was middle of the day, and so it was getting warm. It was around 11 o'clock. So I took his temperature, and I had this bucket of ice water, and I'd been pouring ice water on him. And at this point, I'd done everything that I needed to do as far as taking blood and putting the collar and taking measurements. So I was just waiting for the drug to wear off enough that I could give a reversal agent for the last bit. And it was getting around that time. I had the reversal that I was going to hand inject. And I put a little bit of extra cold water on him, and he kind of jumped to his feet. He looked back and tried to run away, and he kind of stumbled on his feet. And luckily, he was going away. But yeah, that wasn't good. But, you know, it settled down, and I watched him wake up, and he was fine. But yeah. Yes?
About how many lions die a year?
How many lions die a year?
From, like, farmers or...
That's a really hard thing to document because a lot of the lions that are killed, people don't report it. So if you're a farmer and you think you're going to get in trouble by the government, but you want to get rid of this lion, they what they call shoot, shovel, and shut up, is what they say. Right? You shoot the animal, you shovel a grave for it, bury it, and then you don't tell anybody. So that's kind of standard practice in some areas. So it's really hard to gauge. The area that I'm working in, last year, I think they said there were, 5 or 6 that were known to be killed. And there's the population in our study area, we're still figuring that out, but I think it's like 30 or 40. So 5 or 6 is actually pretty substantial. They're not going to be able to replace that every year with cubs. So it's pretty serious. Zach?
Yeah. Since you said the lion range was lost of more than 80%, was that due to development or was that just due to population increasing?
A bit of both, right? We don't see like the development of major cities all over Africa, but villages start to grow and they start to sprawl. And then people are taking pieces of land to do agriculture and have their livestock in. So even though it's not, I wouldn't necessarily consider it development in the Western sense, but you do see a change in land use that infringes on what lions do. So with that increase in people, you see sort of a similar that effect on the landscape. Yes?
What about cub mortality in your study area? And how frequent is it? What's the probable causes?
We're still early days, so hopefully we'll get a sense of that. You know, some of the main causes. I mean, lion cubs die quite frequently. You know, as long as they're able to replace the parents are able to replace themselves, and the population keeps ticking. But you know, some of the biggest threats to lions are when the pride's disturbed and the pride male is taken out for one reason or another. Then the new male comes in and will slaughter all the cubs, so that the female comes into season, so he can sire new cubs with that female. So even though you may be removing one lion and you say, well, that's the bad guy, and you know that we need to just concentrate on him, there's actually this after effect that's devastating to the pride. And if the cubs are less than 6 or 8 months old, that new pride male is going to come in, and he's going to want those dependent cubs out of the way so that he can have cubs of his own. Now, males typically are not territorial and holding a pride for very long. So if they're going to have cubs and they're going to watch over a pride for about 3 years, they have to get moving and produce cubs as soon as possible. So it's a way for them to pass on their genes. You know, it's pretty savage, obviously, and you know, it doesn't sound really nice. But that's why like trophy hunting specifically, if you choose the wrong male, can have a devastating impact on the pride. But again, for our area, it's still early days, so you know, whether that's happening or not, I'm not sure. Yes?
Are there better methods besides killing the lions to get them out of the area? Because if you really think about it, it was their property before people came along and built their houses on their property.
Mm-hmm. We're working towards non-lethal ways of dealing with the situation. And hopefully benefit sharing helps ease the pain of like losses to livestock and increases tolerance. But a lot of people use all different kinds of deterrents and things to chase the lions away, scarecrows and stuff like that. One thing I'm working on developing, and this is something we did with wild dogs in Botswana, was using territorial marking to keep wild dogs out of certain areas. So they're territorial animals. They have a communication system that they use where they don't have to meet and fight all the time. If lions fought every time they saw their neighbors, then it'd be pretty bloody all the time. So this is a way for them to send a message about their pride, tell them how many are present, who they are, how many big males and females and all that kind of thing, so that when the other lions come to that boundary, they can sniff and get a sense of who's there and whether to push that pride or not. So the way that we're using this is to kind of take marks and put them down in an area of a territory where we want the lions to stay out. So if there's a lot of livestock in one part of their territory, we can put scent down and the lions come and say, oh, somebody's here, I better back off. Another lion's here. So we're playing with that now. It hasn't really been developed much for lions or cats at all. We're working on it with wild dogs and a little bit with wolves out west. So that's another thing that we're trying to develop. But it's tricky. And when people get angry, if you have 10 cows and you lose 5 in a night, you want to get rid of lions. And I can totally understand that.
Like, I get that having an invasive species is bad, but it's like ruining their life for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky challenge. I mean, aside from ecological challenge, social, economic, you know, so there's lots of layers to it. It's really, really difficult to tease them out. Like, for the most part, I agree with you that, you know, it would be great if we could back away and leave a lot of that area for lions and other wildlife, but it gets very complicated very quickly. Yes?
Do you have any new forms of antibiotics or things to go into place in case the disease scenario worsens because of the new contact between lions and people?
I'm not as familiar with that side of things, like veterinary medicine, and there are antibiotics that are very effective, and most, or a lot of lions actually live and exist with like feline, like the feline version of HIV. So they have like immunodeficiency virus, but they are able to survive. So they have their own kind of ways of surviving in the face of disease, that they can fend them off if they're not too stressed, if they're not debilitated in some way. So usually they kind of make it work. If we dart an animal and we see, you know, if we caused an injury, typically we'll give antibiotics because it's something that we've caused. But other than that, we kind of let nature play out as much as we can. Yes?
In your research, I was wondering, do the lions ever kill humans?
Occasionally, but not all that often. And usually it's because of some interaction that's caused the lion to be aggressive. A lot of times the stories that you'll hear are maybe like a hunter that's tried to shoot a lion and missed, or a farmer that's like hit part of the lion but not a vital organ, and then the lion is moving, and then people start following it. And lions, like many wild animals, they kind of do this circle back, and all of a sudden, and I've been following lions in these situations where they killed livestock on a farm, and we went and we looked, and then the guys start walking, and there's like 2 guys with rifles, a guy with a spear, and me with a clipboard. Like, and, you know, I just walk behind the guy with the biggest gun, you know, and you're just walking and it starts getting dark, and you come back on your tracks and there's a lion track on top of your tracks. And that's when it's extremely dangerous, right? So, but it's because we've kind of put lions in that situation by disturbing them. And so I won't say they want revenge, I don't know what they want, but they're very attuned to where you're going, and they know where you are, and you don't know where they are. And they're big, but they hide. And so luckily nothing came of it, and the guys that I was with were like, well, it's getting kind of dark, maybe we should. I'm like, are you sure? Okay, let's go back. Yeah. Anyway.
So when you're measuring, when you're taking all these different measurements of the lions, is this only looking for things that influence their population size, or are you looking for other things that are going on? Like I'm trying to say, is the only issue here where the lions are, and if they're getting into farmers' livestock, and then the farmers killing them, or are you looking for more?
A lot of the measurements we take and the blood that we take is really for baseline information. So when we have them asleep, we want to take advantage of everything that we can, right? So if we have an animal down, take every measurement that we can, so that if down the road in 10 or 20 years somebody would like that data to do a study, like comparative anatomy study of lions across their range, like we have some baseline data. For the blood samples, a lot of times we do disease screening to see if there's any evidence of any disease or antibodies like building up in the population, or to see like what healthy lion blood should look like, so that when we see irregularities, we know that they're irregularities. So a lot of it's more baseline information than for anything specific. Yes?
Do lions kill one another if they cause a nuisance?
If they what?
Cause a nuisance?
They can. It does happen, and it's usually between big males that are fighting over territories and prides. So young males that are pretty bold might come into a new area, and that old prime male kind of takes exception to it and will meet those guys. And sometimes you'll get males in coalitions that'll be 3 or 4 young guys against one older guy, or a couple older guys against a couple young guys. And when they fight, it's a pretty scary thing to witness. Just being in a car and watching it, I mean, it's really quite savage. And sometimes it's not one bite and the animal dies. Sometimes it's an injury and that animal can't hunt anymore, and then it slowly dies. So even if you see that altercation and you think, well, he got away, that doesn't mean that it's the end of the story. But yeah, it doesn't happen very often, and there are enough deterrents. They don't want to fight. They know how dangerous it is. They know if they lose, it could be fatal. So it's only in really specific circumstances that don't happen very often that you'll actually see them fight. Yeah. Yes?
About how many babies are born each year?
How many babies are born each year? It really will depend on the pride dynamics. They don't really have a mating season, so it's not that all the cubs are born at one time. So you can have like staggered births, like that picture I showed where you've got all these different age cubs, right? Yeah. So gestations, or the pregnancy is about 3 to 4 months, and then the cubs will stay in the pride for a couple years. Then males will slowly get the boot, and the females will stay in the pride. So, but the mother is not going to have cubs until like 1.5 years, 2 years after their initial birth. And they'll have 3, 4 cubs each time.
Yes? What kind of credentials or prerequisites does one need to be in kind of this sort of program, or one like it?
That's a good question. I think the biggest thing is to be really motivated and driven and being willing to go. And a lot of people talk about wanting to go, and they think it's great, but like to pack up your things and sell your car and go. And I've done that a few times on different projects where I was working somewhere, I got a phone call, they said, when can you be here? I said 2 weeks, and I left. And they're like, you're going to be here for a year. You can't go home in a year. It's like, okay, like, buy my ticket, you know. So that's a big part of it. Once you're there, you get to meet people, and you find a lot more opportunities than you do on the internet sitting here. And there's a lot of people that use the internet and send emails to people every day. I got emails constantly from people, and I wasn't, in many cases, I wasn't even running a project. They just found me. But that's the biggest thing. You know, if you're doing well in school, even doing internships on things that you think have no connection whatsoever, but they're involved in like animal field work or research or whatever. I did my master's on sturgeon. Which is, you know. So, I mean, when I was offered that master's, fully funded master's, and I got the call, and I said, well, fish are very interesting, but I want to work on large African carnivores. I said, well, it's fully funded, come and check it out. So I went and I did that, and I used that time, you know, I did my master's and I did a good job on it, but I also used the library to research as much as I could about leopards in order to submit a Fulbright application, and that's what got me to Namibia for my Ph.D. work. So not discounting things, even if it's bugs and worms or like whatever, just do it. Do it, get experience, get your hands dirty, meet people. That's the best way, for sure. Yeah. And I can give you suggestions if you want. It's longer than my presentation. All right. Thank you very much.